Hey everyone, it's great to see you. Today, we're going to talk about Cyberpunk 2077, developed by CD Projekt Red. I was waiting for a long time for this game. I love the cyberpunk, science fiction, style, genre. Some of the ways in which that it can be thematically philosophic, and some of the ways that it can be so forward-looking, technologically, or dystopian at the same time, really engaged me. And so when I knew that CD Projekt Red, creators behind The Witcher 3, a game which I thought really blew out of the water any action RPG that came around the same time as it. To know they were behind this game, and to know a little bit about the world of Cyberpunk 2077 really made me excited for it. And alas, 2020 comes and the game releases, and it wasn't ready for prime time, folks, and we all know this. And apparently CD Projekt Red knew it as well, because once they saw a lot of the backlash, they decided, okay, well, we need to do a lot of work to get this game up to snuff. And unfortunately, at that time, the game had already released. And it was, to say incredibly disappointing for me, it would be an understatement. But here we are, nearly 3 years later. It's really crazy to think 3 years have already gone by. And I hold in my hands the released in 2020 copy of Cyberpunk 2077, now patched, cleaned, looking sparkly and new with the release of the Phantom Liberty DLC. And so I played it, I platinumed it, I wanted to discuss it. So I like the packaging, first and foremost. I think that CD Projekt Red really went all out with this title when they released it. I mean, we'll open it up here, and let's look through just a little bit of some of the things that you get in this total package here. Oh man, stuff everywhere. You get a world compendium. Look at that. And in this world compendium, you'll learn a little bit about the history of Night City, the gangs that make up Night City, and I think they really focus on that because of the fact that you're going to be interacting with those people quite a bit. And you learn a little bit about the corporations in Night City, as they're also an influential and big part of the world and the game and so on. We get this incredible map of Night City. And I like this map because of its vertical, set. It looks really kind of nice and long, almost, which is how the game looks, or the world looks in the game too. And so I think they did a really good job of capturing it in this nice white, black, yellow aesthetic. One I think is also, again, represented quite well in the game. Oh man, what else did they give us? We also got a number of postcards of Night City, and I don't want to take them all the way out because this little band is really hard to keep together. But I thought that there's a lot of cool art there that they provide. And then I also got a 30-day trial for HBO Max. I don't know why we got that, but we did. And then of course you get the game itself, and inside there's a play disc, and there's also an install disc, a very big game, and and then more stuff inside. What is in here? We get a little welcome and thank you. We get some stickers, and then a little advertising for the merch shop. So when I opened it up, I thought, oh my god, wow, this is a really impressive setup for games that release in the 2020s. But alas, the game cannot simply be everything it comes with. The game was adorned with glitches. It was clearly unfinished. one of the big things that a lot of people talk about was police pursuits. The police literally did nothing in this game. You could go and set off a nuclear bomb, kind of like one of the characters does in the game itself, and the police are nowhere to be found. So fortunately, they've fixed some of that up a little bit. And so this review will be from the lens of version 2.0, which is what I played once the Phantom Liberty DLC and the patches came out, so on and so forth. This game has a very long and storied development history. I believe that the first teaser and the first things we started to hear about it was more than a decade ago. It has to be. So I won't dig too much into those details. I really want to focus on the game itself. And story-wise, and oh my gosh, I don't think there's much I could tell you anyways. I mean, so much has come out over the 3 years about the development and about where CD Projekt Red was, and a lot of the drama surrounding making this game. So let's just talk about the game anyways. You play as this character V. You get a lot of upfront options of how V looks, who V is, and you get to determine some of the various skill points and things, which I will cover a little later. And V is a mercenary in the world of Night City. And V can have a couple of different backgrounds. V can have worked in a corporate job and environment prior to becoming a mercenary. They could have been a street kid and grown up in Night City. They could have been a nomad and come from outside of Night City. And these aspects of V's origin will play a little bit on the types of dialogue and conversation you can have in the game, though ultimately they won't determine much of the rest of the game to come. And I think that was something that a lot of people were particularly upset about. I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay. I would equate it to, and to a lesser degree, Dragon Age Origins, because in Dragon Age Origins there's some 6 or 7 different backgrounds and origins that your character can have, and once you get out of those first couple hours or so, then the game is same no matter what you do, and regardless of that, V becomes a mercenary, gets hired to steal a chip from Arasaka, which is a corporation in the game, and I believe Yorinobu's the name of the gentleman in control of this chip. And anyways, on the mission to get the chip, things go awry, and you end up to safeguard the chip, putting it into your head, and on the chip lives an engram, a construct, an intelligent construct of Johnny Sins, a terrorist who existed in the 2020s or so. And Johnny, it basically is becoming intermingled with your thoughts and your body, and it's believed that the engram will eventually take over and consume V's mind and personality. And so what follows is an adventure across Night City to interact with and meet various characters and people who perhaps along the way will be able to help you kind of figure out how to resolve such a situation, which is very engaging. And I think this is the highlight of Cyberpunk 2077. Every character in this game is fantastically written. I really enjoyed seeing the little details of life in Night City for all these different people. And the way in which CD Projekt Red has captured that is so good. I think that the game really pulled me in with all the pieces of dialogue and all the various things happening in these characters' lives. And there can be actually some big consequences dependent upon the situations you make throughout the story, or the decisions you make throughout the story and how they impact these people. And so when I think about the story in Cyberpunk 2077 and what was crafted with your character's interaction with the world of Night City, super engaging, super interesting, and I'd really emphasize this for a lot of the side content. Like all of the side quests and various side characters you'll meet are again, very cool and inviting for the player to kind of join along in the adventure of and get something out of it. While the main story I felt was pretty good at the same time, and it could resolve in a number of different ways. And so I explored and experienced all the various endings and had a lot of fun with that. There is one ending which in part gets locked behind an incidental, easily missable event in a quest. So that was kind of frustrating. But as far as the story goes, I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was a blast. And if you do enjoy, these science fiction, dystopian, cyberpunk aesthetic themed experiences, I think that they all get really captured quite well here in Cyberpunk 2077. There's just not an experience that I could hold up to it that a game's captured. Though I'd say, as far as kind of the more metaphysics and philosophical aspects of some of these ideas, that I wish the game did a little more. There's a really great moment where you go looking for a gentleman to get some information from on the whereabouts of a person you're looking for, and you have this scene with a doll, and a doll is a person who has an AI kind of built into them that can be switched on and then have a conversation with or whatever. And you do that in one of these scenes where you're just talking to this doll, and she's telling you about your life and about existence and things like that. And the moment is so quiet, and the moment is so kind of special feeling in the way they wrote it, that I wish they did that more in the games. Because when you look at IPs like Blade Runner, you definitely see that a lot more than I think CD Projekt Red did deliver here. Though the narrative does match the environment. I mean, Night City is meant to be this loud, crazy, out of control place, and I think it's often captured really well in the writing. So I won't ramble too much. The story's fantastic. I loved it a lot. Give it a try just based on that. That is a big part of it, but the navigation, the world, and the gameplay are another key aspect. So when I think about the navigation in Cyberpunk 2077, it's pretty interesting. Look at the driving. I think the driving in the game is... I never did quite get a handle on many of the vehicles in the game. They all felt very slippery, and it was really hard to engage in a turn because oftentimes I felt like the acceleration of turns, if you know what I mean, like whether it starts slowly and then increases, or whether you have this very sharp turn right away. Some of those aspects I feel like didn't quite feel as honed in as, say, like a Grand Theft Auto 5 or something like that. And you can also get around the world by walking, of course. I was impressed by the GPS's ability to effectively navigate me through its very vertical environment at times, or maybe you have to go upstairs, you have to climb something, and the GPS often in the mini-map captured those moments, so you didn't get lost too often for those. In what happens in the in-between is, of course, you're talking with people, you're having dialogue, conversations, and then you're fighting, and you're doing a lot of fighting. And in Cyberpunk 2077, there's a big variety to the ways in which you can do that. You could build up your hacker skill, and you could hack and kill people without even initiating conflict, which I found very effective for if you're playing a stealth-based character. You could use melee weapons and become a specialist in katanas or explosives or various different types of weapons, ones that require cybernetics to use effectively, ones that are more traditional assault weapons and pistols. And I had a lot of fun with this. It was really exciting to approach a place that I knew I had to go do something at, which oftentimes a lot of these like side content pieces involve like, oh, go in the warehouse and hack into the computer to steal the files. So that content itself wasn't exciting. But I would enjoy thinking about, okay, looking at this environment, okay, they got turrets, there's camera systems, I see some enemies, but how do I want to approach this? Do I want to be quiet and try to get away with taking a few of them off before setting off an alarm? Or do I want to hack into the cameras and then switch the turrets to make them enemies to the characters? And it was a lot of fun in the ways in which you could play around with your approach to combat and the way in which you tackled situations. And so I found a lot of fun with it. What I did is I played a more hacking-based character where I was using net running abilities to take over cameras and, like I was saying, switch turrets onto enemies, or using... I had a really great skill where you could essentially take over somebody's cybernetics and it would damage them, and then it could spread out to other characters too. It was like a virus. Oftentimes I'd go into a situation where there were grouped enemies in an encounter, and they'd all just be dead before I could even pull out my weapon because I was just using that skill. So I really did enjoy the combat in the game. But I think where the game kind of falters for me is when you consider more of like the feeling of the world itself. Like Night City doesn't feel real. I wish it felt realer. And what I mean by that is we can look at the civic infrastructure, like the buildings. One thing I want to shout out is that Night City is an incredible city to look at. I don't think a city of this scale has been represented in the way that that CD Projekt Red has accomplished. Like, you really feel like this tiny person in a big world. But when I think about, I've traveled a lot. I've been to countries that this game really takes some inspiration from visually. You know, Hong Kong is a great example. The scale of a place like Hong Kong and the infrastructure of a place like Hong Kong is still just not represented in this game in its totality. And this requires a lot of depth that I don't think that CD Projekt Red really captured here, whether it's from like the simple things like there's flying cars, why can't we travel in a flying car? There's monorails, like, okay, well, why can't we get on the train to travel? And I dislike that this game, along with a lot of open world games nowadays, really crutch on creating fast travel just to get around everywhere, because I think it destroys the continuity of the open world experience. And I think that's what CD Projekt Red really banked on here, because kind of your options for traversing is, again, you can drive, and at any beck and call, you can call a vehicle to show up right next to your feet, and you can hop in it and drive around. Or you can fast travel, and I didn't find that to be a very satisfying experience from the lens of, this is supposed to be a mega city. This is supposed to be the mega city on the west coast of the United States in a dystopian world. You know, why is there a handful of skyscrapers in the downtown area? And why is it that there's nobody on the streets, right? Like, you will find a lot of NPCs in places when you're on foot, and you would imagine NPCs to be like a marketplace and so on. But outside of that, you'll be in your car and see nobody anywhere. And this is a common criticism of the game, so I'm not in the minority to say this. But it really does impact the game's immersion, because for every moment where I was thinking, wow, I truly feel in this world, was another where I was saying, okay, well, obviously it's not real. And once you leave the city itself, you lose a lot of what real cities have. You know, why is it that just straight north of the city is this destructive oil landfill, and to the east there's absolutely nothing, just a desert? Like, there should be some scalable sprawl. Like, you think about Los Angeles, scalable sprawl. You have huge buildings in the center, but that's not where it ends. There should be, you know, suburbs and smaller, more less dense areas that kind of spread out. And I think this is what you know, different parts of the game should have looked at, is really developing and building the character of Night City beyond some advertisements and beyond some of the dialogue that you get from characters. And I think one thing that really affects the world building in the game is that 99% of the world and the lore is told to you in the form of picking up little chips everywhere, and every level has like 5 or 6 of these that are explaining to you what's happening in the story, who these gangs are, what the environment's like, the history of certain circumstances that build in this game. And I think the average player, including me, is going to get tired of reading these or skip them entirely. And as a result, they're going to lose a lot of what's core to the game, the lore, the history of Night City. And when the average person is not really taking these things into account, you just don't feel it as if the city's real or as real. And so I feel like where the game's most weak is really in its world building, and I think that it's not been fully resolved with the latest patches. And so I think that for as much as I enjoyed the writing and the characters who really speak to the character of Night City in 2077, everything about the world, like I couldn't tell you, oh, you know, in 2020 when Johnny Sins was alive, these were the current events. I could tell you what Johnny Sins did, and I could tell you who he did it to and the effects of that, but I couldn't tell you the things about what's happening around him. Whereas like a great example is I recently played Divinity Original Sin 2, and in that game there is so much backstory that is presented to you through the dialogue and interacting with characters that I could tell you all about the world of Divinity Original Sin 2. And I spent less time playing that than I did Cyberpunk 2077. I played this game twice through completely, and about 20 hours when it first came out. I've spent about 200 hours in this world, and I'm still missing a lot of the core background. And the easy criticism is, okay, well then you should spend more time reading these little chips and things. But the more complete criticism is that the CD Projekt Red should have spent more time developing these aspects of the game. Okay, so really, I enjoy open world games quite a bit. I do like the gameplay loop of going and speaking with characters, and again, really enjoying the narrative aspects of that, and then going to so-and-so place to complete the objective of generally interacting with a computer or so on, and the fighting along the way. Sometimes it was so fun to just grab a shotgun and run and blasting people, and other times it was really great to sneak around and use my stealth abilities and my net running abilities to get through a level. But either way that I approached it, it was so exciting and so fun. And the one thing that I really, really wanted out of this game that The Witcher 3 just does so much more in its writing is really feel invited to learn about the world in a very accessible way. That is not just like reading a million chips laid around each level that you go to. So that is something that quite disappointed me. But moving on from gameplay and the navigation of the world, I did really want to say that I love the sound design in this game. The city it sounds so alive. Like if you were just to stop and pause, you'd hear the ambience of cars driving, you'd hear PAs going off with people speaking and characters conversing in the background. And so I love that the sound was such an important part for delivering the character of Night City, because Night City itself is a character. And it's captured through this ambiance, but also through its fantastic soundtrack, which just slaps in every single way. And so I had a really enjoyable time just driving around, just listening to the music and enjoying the vibes. There's a lot of vibes here. And graphically the game is beautiful, and again captures a scale which I found to be really impressive. And not just in this game looks great because it's using the latest technology kind of way, but also with the art design. Everything from the moment you boot up the game to when you're running around Night City or pausing and just looking at the buildings. I thought it really captured a lot of the feelings that I had when, again, I went to a place like Hong Kong, or I went to a place like Tokyo, and at times late at night or after eating and just walking around and just looking up at buildings and things. There's this beautiful aesthetic that I think Night City and CD Projekt Red captured in a way I just haven't seen in a game of this scale. And so I found that to be really impressive. I have so much that I'd want to say about this game. I spent so much time in it, but I think that kind of summarizes a lot of my key thoughts. The character writing is fantastic. The main story is pretty engaging. The gameplay, the variety in it, and your ability to really transform V into the type of character you want them to be is really impressive. One thing I did want to say is that I wish that there was a little more of that philosophical, deep system building environment that you see in some CRPGs. Larian's just blowing it out of the park with this kind of stuff. And I wish it was more represented in the world and in the writing that you would experience as somebody just pile driving through the game and just enjoying it. And a big part of it, which is driving around, I thought was kind of funky at times, kind of slippery. But the music was incredible, the graphics were fantastic, and as disappointing as this game was when it launched, you can still really see all of the things that make CD Projekt Red such a great company really represented here in the game. And so I'm super mixed on this game. I loved it, and I played 200 hours of it. I mean, you gotta really enjoy a title for you to get there. But at the same time, I wanted so much more of it, and I'm sure a lot of that is my hype and my expectations when I went into it, and for the crazy amount of time I waited to play this. I mean, to preface, I've pre-ordered maybe 3 or 4 games in my entire life, and Cyberpunk 2077 was one of them. That it was kind of disappointing, but I do think that it's a game that everybody should pick up and everybody should experience, because I think it'd be a good introduction to a whole world and a whole genre of science fiction that maybe a lot of people haven't explored, and one that I find to be particularly engaging. So, okay, what did you think about Cyberpunk 2077? Would love to know. And if you liked the video, please like the video, and would love for you to subscribe and stick around for more. Well, until next time, hope you have a great day, and take care. Thanks for tuning in.